Talking about preventing teen suicide. We have in the studio Kristi Haynes. She runs the Youth Suicide Prevention Program for the Tri-Cities. Kristi, is that fair?
That is a good description, yes.
Okay, good. And Kristi was so great to bring along Laverne McGrath. Laverne is a parent, mother. She lost her son Jesse like 15 years ago to suicide, and now can talk about it and share those experiences with others. So Laverne, thank you so much for coming today, because it's really important to hear what you have to say.
Thank you.
So, Kristi, let's start with having you share with us, I mean, what kind of a problem are we talking about nationally and locally? Is this a big problem?
It is, unfortunately. Youth suicide is the third leading cause of death nationally for kids 10 to 19 years of age. And in Washington State, it's actually 10% higher than the national average, and it's the second leading cause of death for kids that age here in Washington State.
Washington State? Why?
Well, recently there was a survey done on mental health and mental health access, and we actually, Washington State ranked 48th in the country for the amount of people in our state who are suffering from mental illness and their access to care, their inability to access care. So we rank very low nationally in that regard.
Okay. So the biggest underlying factor that leads to suicide is mental illness. Is that what I just heard you say?
Correct. Yeah, most people who attempt suicide have or die by suicide have an underlying mental health, undiagnosed usually, mental health condition that hasn't been treated or treated correctly.
Well, what does that mean? Are we talking about depression,
Yeah,
bipolar,
depression,
what?
bipolar disorder, and there are other mental illnesses too but not everyone who think, but about 80% of the time there's an undiagnosed mental health disorder.
How is teen suicide different from adults that try or commit suicide, or is it different?
I guess I'd say it really isn't that different. It's pretty much the same as far as the means used, and that it's usually caused by a underlying mental health condition. I think that the majority of suicides are happening amongst an older population. I don't want to present it like teen suicide is, because the actual numbers are more reflective in like middle-aged men and men even higher men over 70. So it's not really, the causes of it really aren't different, but if mental health isn't diagnosed and treated, it can become worse in older age, as people age. And so we want to make sure that we're treating kids at a young age for it, because it can impact their schooling, their, the type of work they get later in life if we're not treating those mental illnesses.
Laverne, 15 years ago, had your son attempted suicide before?
No.
This was kind of a shock then, I am going to guess.
Yeah, it was a complete hit everybody off guard.
Yeah. So was he suffering from depression, do you think, or anything like that? It's sometimes, quite frankly, it's hard to separate depression in teenagers and teenagers that are just sometimes ornery or difficult or going through a difficult patch in their growing up. So did he have any depression or any other mental illness?
Nothing that we knew. Looking back, a lot of times it's like, if you were there at the time, I didn't see it. Looking back, I think there were lots of little things. I think that there's no ever one cause or effect to anything that we do. I think there were a lot of things that compiled within it.
What happened with your family when this was discovered?
Well, at the time I was in Indiana. This happened in Arizona. I was in Indiana burying my grandmother, and so I was notified when I was in Indiana,
Mhm.
When I came back, you know, it's through everybody. I mean, we don't realize the way, the spider web of pain that happens and how we are also interconnected. There were things that happened that resulted from that where, the copycatting. There was also, drugs and alcohol. My one son ended up actually going to prison for a while when he started getting flashbacks and drinking. So a lot of disasters happened from this one thing. And you never really heal. You just get used to it.
Whoa. So one of my questions was how it affects family and friends, and I guess from your experience you can share with us that it's pretty devastating.
Oh, yeah. It's nothing you'd wish on anyone.
Mhm.
It affected his cousins, all of his friends. Years later, I was working with this woman, and it ended up, we were talking that her daughter had went to the same school as my son, and we found out that she actually knew my son, and it just devastated her. And all she knew of my son was that my son would pass her in the hallway every day and would smile at her and say, "Good morning." And she'd say, "Mama, he was the only one that noticed I was there." And he'd say, "Hi, good morning." And she goes, "I look forward to it. He's not there anymore." And from then on, she had to go to counseling. And so for that, it's like, wow, you don't realize how important you are to even the
Mhm.
people that you just smile at every day. And when that's gone, it's huge.
Mhm. So you didn't see any warning signs. Kristi, share with us what are some of those warning signs that we should be looking out for, but I question whether, we don't always see them. And they're not always there.
Right. It's really important though that we know these signs, because it might not be your child. It may be a niece or a nephew or one of your friends, your kid's friends. And so some of those warning signs are obviously signs of depression, but that hopelessness and withdrawal from family and friends is an important one to watch for. Also, a preoccupation with death or a strong wish to die. Oftentimes kids will research suicide on their computer or write about it in essays, that kind of thing. A previous suicide attempt is a warning sign, obviously. The recent suicide of a friend or family member can trigger thoughts of suicide. Increased drug or alcohol use, those kinds of things. Giving away prized possessions.
Mm-hmm.
They're all strong warning signs.
Mm-hmm.
And that we should know that when we see those warning signs, that we don't ignore them, that we ask about them. We need to tell kids when we notice these things, let them know that we've noticed, that we've seen a change in behavior, and that we're concerned. We want to let them know that we care about them, and ask the question directly. If you're concerned somebody's thinking about suicide, ask them directly. Are you thinking about suicide?
Oh, ask them directly.
Ask them directly.
Put it right on the table.
Put it on the table. When we don't put it on the table, it just adds to the stigma around it, and that it's something they have to suffer with alone. And so when we talk about it in a non-judgmental way, and we take some of the emotion out of it, then we create a safe place for them to talk about something very difficult for them. And so we want to ask it directly and to the point. And then we want to get them the help that they need. Let them know that they're not alone, that we're going to stay with them and help them get the help that they need, and that we're open to talking about it at any time.
Mm-hmm.
And there is help out there, 24/7. People are never alone with this. You can always call a crisis hotline.
We're going to take a break here, but when we come back, I know that Laverne has some really interesting things that she's thought about over these years, about things that she wished that she would have talked with her son about. They're good things for you to hear. We'll be back, and you'll have a chance to hear those. Stay with us. Welcome back to Meet in the Middle on this Tuesday, December 1st. My guests are Kristi Haynes and Laverne McGrath, and we're talking about teen suicide. Kristi runs the Youth Suicide Prevention Program here in the Tri-Cities. It's actually a statewide effort, and she is working here in the Tri-Cities to educate more people, both children, youth, and parents as well. Laverne is a parent of 3 children. Her son Jesse committed suicide 15 years ago when he was 15 years old. So, Laverne, I went to that commercial break by telling people, kind of setting you up. I hope that's okay, but you had shared with me before some things that you thought about and realized that were kind of like holes or gaps, things that you could have or wish you would have talked with your son about. What are some of those things?
I think the biggest thing is for him to know how important and essential he was to the whole of our, the whole network of our family and his friends. Having him understand that he's this essential piece, and without him, so much was lacking. I don't think that he understood that, and I know that we never talked about it. We never really talked ever about suicide. Or depression, or what do you do with those feelings, and knowing that, and to open that communication. Sometimes I think about it as, when we used to talk about sex education, it's like, don't talk about it, they'll do it. And I'm thinking sometimes we think about suicide that way, don't talk about it, it'll put ideas in their head. I'm thinking, no, we need to talk about it. We need to know how awful and the worst experience in the world that you could ever give anyone is that. And I truly do believe that if my son would have known the amount of pain and the amount of disasters that came from this, he was a good boy, and he wouldn't have done that, But we didn't talk about it. We didn't talk about, what does depression feel like? What is it? How do you know that you're at a point where you need to talk to somebody? You need to reach out. What does lonely feel like? What does frustration feel like? What does it feel like to feel trapped or overwhelmed? And then when those feelings start to spiral, and they start going down and down, and they get stronger and stronger, and you start to spiral down into depression, hopeless and helpless. If we can recognize that those are lies, there's always hope, and there's always options, and there's so many choices. Those are the discussions that I wish I would have had. If we would have open discussions about our mental well-being, that any of us can find ourselves in a state of depression. And when you're in a state of depression for more than 2 weeks, you need to get some help. Where, if we understood that the chemical imbalance in our brain, we're all there. We're not separate. This is not like, there's, us against them, the people that are needing, mental health compared to those that don't. We all need to be mentally healthy. And it's opening those doors and opening that communication. To me, that's my biggest regret, is that I didn't know. I didn't, and I want to shake. I want to climb up on the mountain, and I want to scream to all the parents and say, be aware. Because once it gets down into those disparaging moments, poor choices are made. It'll either end up in the grave or in the prison or an addiction that lasts forever. Those are huge things, and we really need to be aware of that. I used to teach my children to brush their teeth because it would keep their mouth clean. Eat right because it'll take your body, make it more healthy. Do your homework because that's how you're going to go to college and you're going to get a good job. And I never thought that I really needed to take care and really show them what it takes to be mentally healthy. And it's more important even than our physical health, which is hilariously funny when you think about it, and I never thought about it, And I think if all parents knew that it's not separate, we're all in the same boat.
So was Jesse your oldest child?
He was my youngest.
He was your youngest, okay. Then did you turn around and use some of those things on your other 2 children that you learned? Did you apply them to those
Yeah, I
children?
actually wrote books,
Oh, okay.
and I made sure that they read them. I opened my door to any child. Jesse there were people. I opened my door to everyone. call me, talk to me. So sometimes 3 o'clock in the morning I'd get a call, and that was fine. I became more aware of other people, you know, not just my own children, but other people, my nieces and nephews, and the communication got opened. I
Mhm.
mean, we talked. My sisters talked to their children, you know, our friends all talked to their children. Because that's super, super, super important to know that there's adults, there's people around that care so much for you and love you so much that your state of being is ultimately important to us all.
Mhm. So, Kristi, this sounds like really, really important messages to get to parents, per se, just as we're talking about parents. Is that some of the job that you are doing?
It is. We offer parent trainings, usually through the schools or the faith community. Oftentimes we'll offer that as well. So I do parent trainings, and then I also do the majority of the work I do, though, is with students in our area, in the schools, middle schools and high schools. And basically our program teaches kids to recognize the warning signs with their peers, and really promotes help-seeking behaviors to make sure that they know a trusted adult that they will let them know if one of their friends is showing any of these signs.
Mhm. How do you get into the schools? Do they request you, or do you contact the schools and say, I'd like to be there, or what? How does that work?
Well, I've been doing this for 8 years, so I've developed relationships with the different school districts, and sometimes they call me and have me come in, and other times, you know, I contact them, say, hey, I haven't done a training for a while, or are you planning on doing one this year? So, yeah, so actually this Thursday I'll be at Ochoa Middle School. I was at Amistad Elementary last night doing a parent training. I've spent some time in Prosser educating some kids over there, and so I'm just pretty much all over Benton and Franklin counties.
So if you have a group and maybe you'd like to request that Kristi come and talk to you, here's their website. It's yspp.org, O-R-G, and you can look up her email there and find out more about some of the resources. Well, what kind of resources do we have here in the Tri-Cities? I mean, obviously, and what kind of resources do we have for low-income families that might not be able to afford, you know, top-notch psychiatrists or
Right.
counseling?
We do have Lutheran Community Services has a couple different programs, the SWIFT program and the wraparound program, with very specific, guidelines of who they serve. But a very good resource here in Tri-Cities, Catholic Family Services. We have, of course, a lot of good private therapists available, and some that are on a sliding scale. And will serve people without insurance. But to be honest, we're lacking in resources. Families who are in crisis, who need inpatient care for their children who are suicidal and suffering from mental health issues, oftentimes have to go out of our area to get that care. So oftentimes go to Children's Hospital or Yakima or Spokane. We only have one crisis bed here in our community.
One?
One. And so, yeah. So we are, it's a struggle. It's a struggle for school counselors, because for the people who are hooking kids up with resources, there's always help available. We have a local crisis response unit. And very important to use them if you think somebody's thinking about suicide. They're available 24/7. But it's the aftercare after the crisis and getting that help that can be problematic here locally. So it would be. I have a coalition that meets monthly, and part of our goal as a coalition, Laverne serves on that coalition with me, is to create a better safety net in our community, to really take care of youth that are in that situation. And
Mhm.
so we're constantly advocating for more mental health resources.
What's the crisis hotline, or is there some hotlines that people can call? And I know you were telling me there's one specifically for younger people?
Uh-huh. There is one for kids nowadays text so much that when I go out and do these trainings in the schools, I've been asking them, would you rather text or call someone? And they're more comfortable actually with texting. So we now have a crisis text line, and that number is 741-741, and they get really immediate response from a text, and a live counselor will come on and talk with them about what's going on. But then there's also the national hotline, which is 1-800-273-8255, and that's also available 24/7. So there's always someone to talk to.
Mm-hmm. Always someone to talk to. So Laverne, what would be your best piece of advice? I know that you've given it now multiple times to parents who might find themselves in a situation where they just have this little inkling, like, wow, something's just not right here. What would you say to them?
Open communication, always. Talk to your kids. If you think that there's suicide taking place, those thoughts in their mind, just ask them, are you thinking about killing yourself? Are you thinking about suicide? When you notice, when they're getting depressed or when they're out, there's those warning signs. Open it up and talk. But don't just wait for those signs. Always keep that communication open and really allowing them to talk about. And it's okay for you to say, I'm feeling depressed, this is what it feels like. Do you feel like that?
Mm-hmm.
Open those communications so that it's not a scary box, After the fact, I learned the hard way, and I don't want anyone else to do that. I know prevention works because when I opened my door, many, many children came in and talked. I saved my other sons when I was aware and really was able to talk and say, call me. I call, as an adult, I'll call up my parent or, my friend and say, okay, I really need someone's ear. I'm feeling lonely. I need someone's ear. And
Mm-hmm.
I have that network already in place when somebody knows, and they have the same thing with me. Building those networks and those strong bonds, knowing that, I forget what is that how many people are from the youth health program where the children think that they don't have adults?
Oh, over 50% of our kids in the schools reported on the Healthy Youth Survey that they don't have a trusted adult to turn to when they're feeling sad and hopeless. And that's something that we need to change as adults. It's something each one of us can do. We can become just more available to kids and really listen to them, to understand what they're going through, not to judge or fix them, but really understand what it is that they're going through. And if we can keep that in mind, we can all make a difference and we can save lives.
Thank you both for joining us today. It's really, really good information. Laverne, I appreciate so much that you are courageous and willing to share your story because it helps a lot of other people. Kristi, keep up the good work.
Thank you. Thank you.
We'll be back in a moment. We're going to talk about the Salvation Army, so stay with us here. December 1st, meet in the middle.